All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nehul Vyas, and I'm a Director of Analytics Consulting and leader of AVAP's Tableau Solution Group. We're so appreciative of the opportunity to present to you all today, and certainly appreciative of your attendance and engagement throughout this session. Before we dig into our topic, I'd like to provide just a quick overview and share a little bit about ourselves. Jason, could you mind going to the next slide for me, please? AVAP is a cross-platform, industry-specialized global IT advisory and management consulting firm. Our span of consulting and technology resources enable us to build for the future faster and better than before, combining a massive breadth of experienced consultants across several consulting practice areas with the ability to support clients across multiple sectors and industries. Our analytics offerings span the entire data value chain, from organizational data strategy, where we help clients develop a comprehensive roadmap, to their analytics and technology investments, rapid ROI, where the focus is on driving adoption and utilization of an analytics capability across the organization's footprint, and continuous value to focus on sustained and scalable growth. These three pillars are complemented through our ability to execute engagements from robust and transformative solution delivery, supporting enterprise data initiatives, Tableau dashboarding quick starts, Tableau technical health checks with the focus on the infrastructure, setup and configuration of a Tableau environment, and we even serve as a managed services provider to some of our clients to fully host their Tableau capability, accompanied with full service operational SLAs and hands-on maintenance and administration. Before we get into introductions, I wanted to quickly mention that if you have a question at any time during the presentation, please either use the QA box at the bottom of your screen or the chat function. We'll be happy to get to your questions in due time. The session will also be available on demand within 2 business days of its recording. Now it's my distinct pleasure to welcome my friend, my peer, Director of Analytics, leader of our analytics capability, Jason Wood. Jason, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Nehul. Glad to be here.
Jason, I know we've got thank you, man. I know we've got a great one today talking about fraud analytics. I don't want to hold you up here any longer than I have to. The floor is yours, my friend.
Great. Thanks, Nehul. All right. Oops. So I'm going to be talking about an example of AVAP's unemployment fraud analytics work for one of our large state government customers, where Tableau played a key role from a technology perspective. And it all really started when the COVID pandemic hit back in March of 2020. The state realized, and many states realized, that there was a problem with unemployment fraud. They didn't really know how big the problem was yet. But once we started working with them, we really started to realize the impact, which was in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So to attack this problem, AVAP partnered with the state to iteratively build out a fraud analysis and detection solution, starting small with an initial prototype that we built in Tableau and Tableau Prep to quickly get something tangible to the subject matter experts and users to gather feedback. And then from there, continue to iteratively expand, scale out the solution for users and executives to really more effectively and efficiently monitor and detect fraud with a fully operational or comprehensive kind of one-stop shop application to get them all the information they need and act accordingly. After our initial release, which was it was built in about 2 to 3 weeks, we started delivering enhancements in weekly agile sprints with show and tells and prod releases after each release and each sprint to train, gather feedback and awareness to get them ready for using the solution after each release. And to effectively implement these constant, quick enhancements on a weekly basis, we made sure when we built it out that the architecture the solution was using a framework that was flexible and scalable so that we could open it up each week, make tweaks, and constantly improve the solution, because as we found out, the fraud environment was continuously changing. The fraudsters were getting smarter and smarter. We were learning new things as we went, so we wanted to make sure we can continuously keep up and enhance the solution in an efficient way. So the current state today, it actually pulls data from many different source systems to provide fruitful data for the solution in addition to the unemployment systems. It includes over 60 fraud scenarios that all claimants go through every night, goes through all of the scenarios, gets flagged for those scenarios. It also goes through a machine learning predictive model that we build out to identify high probability fraud and provide fraud scores for all claimants every night. That outputs into a variety of different Tableau dashboards, but one really comprehensive fraud detection application tool that they use Tableau for to get their information. This comprehensive solution enables the fraud investigation team, analysts to efficiently identify high probability fraud claims and suspicious activity for them to investigate and act on. And alternatively, it also allows them to have high precision in detecting claimants that shouldn't be flagged for fraud, that are less likely to be fraud, so that those claimants can get their unemployment benefits that they deserve. So although Tableau is not the only technology that is used for this solution, as others like big data platform, predictive modeling tools, data engineering tools, et cetera, it was the main dashboarding tool and main tool, I guess, for presenting all of the information, which is a lot of information that's gathered together to the investigation team to do their analysis. So it's really that end product that they go to get all of the information they need. So why Tableau from that perspective? It's simple and consumable. With all the information that we gather and put the data through in the 60+ scenarios, there's a lot of information for them to use at their disposal to act on accordingly. And Tableau allows us to get all that information, put it into a very user-friendly, interactive format that they can understand. They can quickly see the information and get to the information that they need to pull it out and really do their investigations that they need to do to attack the fraud problem. It's also very interactive and actionable. In addition to providing summary level metrics, we have provided the ability for them to drill through a variety of different paths to get to a lot of different detailed information that they need to get to in order to address the fraud. So that is a very big part of it. Rather than sifting through just dumps of data or just raw data, this provides a very efficient way for them to do that. It's collaborative. It's a very self-service, user-friendly tool that the business and users can really understand and really get engaged with, rather than that black box development that may happen on some traditional fraud solutions that may be kind of more black box development that spit out outputs without the users being really engaged. It's flexible and scalable. This was obviously important because we're continuously scaling the solution every week, adding new scenarios, reacting to the environment, adding new features to help them better address fraud and more efficiently address fraud and improve their processes. So Tableau allows a lot of flexibility and scalability for us to do that. And then efficient data prep and analysis. So getting the data into the format that it needs to get into to build those Tableau dashboards is big. And we use Tableau prep in this solution, which has been helpful, specifically not in the massive data processing, but to get the final data prepped and into the format that we need to for the dashboard to be effective. All right, so what was our approach to building out this solution? And this approach isn't just for Tableau, it's really for any modern analytics use case development. And it's all about agility and flexibility and being iterative. So we use a modern iterative development flow when building out these use cases. And it kind of breaks out into different steps to build this out. The first is that we go through is ideation and scenarios. So meeting with not really IT, but the business side, understanding what their vision is, what are their scenarios, what questions do they want to answer, and working with them to kind of get that information and going into it kind of with an open mind, not being kind of focused on certain scenarios or anything like that. Just open mind. What is your ultimate vision? What are the questions that you want to get answered? And then that leads into, once you have those scenarios and questions defined, start identifying where the data needs to come from to answer those questions. So locate, acquire the data necessary to identify those questions and scenarios. Then data preparation. So you have access to the data. Now let's start preparing it, modeling it, getting it into a format that we can start presenting to the users. And then solution prototyping. So start prototyping a solution. Don't wait for all of the requirements to be hashed out and fully vetted. Start prototyping, get something into the user's hands quickly for them to react to. So that's kind of the next step there. And then from there, gather feedback and agile development, iteratively build out the comprehensive initial release of the solution that they need to get it in their hands for official use, which then you deploy to production, you automate the solution, operationalize the solution, optimize the solution so that it's continuously refreshing and in the production environment. And then stabilization and enhancement. So monitor, gather feedback. And this process gets repeated pretty much weekly after the initial release. So you go through these, get their initial release out to the users, and then you really repeat this process very iteratively. Like I said, we have done it weekly, and the cadence can vary from use case to use case, but you repeat it, you go back, identify additional scenarios, features, requirements. Is there any additional data access that's needed? Do you already have access to the data? Prepare the data, prototype the feature, get feedback, implement it, release it to production, and just repeat this process as you continue to scale it out. Again, rather than that waterfall approach where you would upfront gather all of the requirements, which in scenarios like this can be never ending, which is why it's important to really start small, get something in the hands of the users, get feedback, get it operational as a minimum viable product, and then continue to iteratively enhance and scale it as you go, and kind of follow the value as you go. So some lessons and learnings, and I kind of talked about a few of these before, but one big one that I just mentioned is don't wait for all detailed requirements to be fully vetted. There's so many unknowns out there that they just didn't know at the time. It was important to get something into the hands of the users quickly, allow them to provide actionable, tangible feedback that we could take, and then build that minimum viable product, and then continuously iterate from there based on what findings are, where the value is the recommended way there. Start small and plan for a phased implementation approach, as we mentioned before, iteratively. Another big key factor to be effective in this, and it's getting the data centralized. So centralizing the data into a single platform. So all the data that is needed needs to be acquired, bringing that into a centralized data platform for secure and efficient analysis, exploration, enable efficient data sharing. This is really important when it comes to new features or things like that, when we're constantly building things out, rather than having to go to 7 different data sources every time to figure it out. All the data is available in a centralized data platform, and it's really just about building the new feature and exploring the data. So this makes the process much more efficient when you have all of your required data onboarded onto a centralized data platform that you could then run all your analysis from that single point. Is a big, huge advantage to run this efficiently. Use case ideation and sponsorship should be driven by the business, not IT. The business really knows what are the scenarios, what are the true questions that need to be answered, and they can really think outside the box. They know what their pain points are, what their challenges are. IT can be helpful, but a lot of times the business has the best understanding of what's the true value and what's the true need. So it's important to make sure that they're the ones that are really driving those use case ideation discussions. And then sharing successes to increase adoption and momentum. Make sure that everybody's aware of the solution, the effectiveness of the solution to increase adoption, training, awareness. That's why we do weekly show and tells for every release, just to make sure. In addition to that, there's monthly, quarterly releases of just new information, new insights. So just an important part of the process is adoption. So making sure there's a focus on that as well. All right, so a little bit more into the solution. This slide kind of provides a little bit of an overview, and then we'll do a little bit of deeper dive into the different components of the solution. But the solution overall, it's a fully operational fraud detection solution that leverages modern analytics technologies and techniques. And there's a few different components of the solution. First is obviously the front-facing Tableau dashboards. There's 7 primary fraud dashboards, Tableau dashboards that are used by the users and investigators. There's many others that are out there for more ad hoc self-service dashboards that they can build on their own with the data sources in Tableau. But there's really 7 primary ones that have been built out and are fully operational that provide the actionable information that they need from the entire solution. Tableau servers, a big part of it for operationalizing and centralizing all of these dashboards and data sources, and making sure they're continuously refreshed. So that's a big part of it. Tableau prep, I mentioned before, is a part of it as well. So comprehensive Tableau prep workflows to do that final data preparation, to get the data in an efficient format to feed those dashboards. I mentioned before as well, a lot of data engineering to get all of the data integrated into a centralized statewide data sharing platform, where complex data engineering and modeling can be conducted for efficient analysis. So bringing all the data into that centralized platform where we can run all of our analysis processes in one single location, rather than constantly going back to the data sources every time we need something new. And then another big part of it is the machine learning predictive model that was built as part of this solution that uses advanced statistical analysis and continuous learning that detects patterns in the data. So it actually bases it on actual data patterns rather than known fraud scenarios, but it's actually looking at data patterns and how fraud is being adjudicated and identifying high probability fraud from that. So another big part of the solution that allows for highly accurate predictions of fraud in the solution. All right, so kind of deep dive into the individual components there. From the primary dashboards perspective, there's really one main tool. It's the comprehensive fraud dashboard tool, which is a centralized fraud dashboard that is highly interactive, robust, has all of the scoring information, a lot of different ways to drill through into detailed level information, as well as providing some high level important KPIs and alerts that they need to be aware of when investigating fraud. So it's really the primary solution that has all of the 60 plus scenarios, flags incorporated, all of the fraud scoring probabilities within the dashboard, and drill through capabilities through different drill through paths to get through to the detailed information they need for their investigation. We also built what we call cross-population match dashboards, where we took the unemployment population and matched them up against other suspicious population data sets that should not be receiving unemployment fraud. So if you think of incarcerated individuals or death records, matching it up against those data sets to see if the claimant exists in there, which they shouldn't be. So there's dashboards that specifically focus and provide results from that for them to leverage, just because that's was a key focus area for them throughout that they wanted their own dashboards to provide that information. And that's pretty relevant across many different fraud solutions or industries where you want to match up against data sets that that population shouldn't exist in. Executive dashboards as well too. So in addition to the really comprehensive fraud dashboard tool, there were executive dashboards that really just provided those key KPIs for executives to get their quick information that they need and alert them if something is off or needs to be acted upon. And then also dashboards around contact center and workforce productivity for addressing fraud, to make sure that those were performing optimally and identifying issues or concerns there as well. And all right, so we mentioned Tableau prep as well as part of the solution. So Tableau prep, really, there was a lot of data engineering, predictive modeling, data modeling work on the back end for some of the more advanced stuff. But then once that's all done, Tableau prep is leveraged to really take all of those results and again, clean it up, format it, cleanse it to get it into an efficient format for all of these dashboards to leverage, to have a nice clean data source for them to efficiently build that out. And all of those are in server on a refresh schedule as well, which is nice. And then, as I just mentioned, Tableau server is a big part of it as well. So all the Tableau prep workflows are published to Tableau server and run processes daily to keep the data fresh. The data sources are also there and available for users to leverage to actually build their own dashboards and ad hoc dashboards as needed, in addition to the fully operational ones that are built as well. So a lot of sharing, collaboration, and centralized just location for all of the users to really act and investigate and analyze fraud. All right, and we mentioned getting data and the importance of getting it onto a centralized platform. And this is just kind of a high-level conceptual architecture of what that kind of looks like. And if I start from the left side here, you can see has all the different sources. So as you can see, we're pulling the data from a lot of different sources. There's traditional unemployment, which is the unemployment system that most states have that have been around for a long period of time. Then as the pandemic hit, there was the pandemic unemployment system, a completely separate system, completely different type of unemployment. That was a completely new data source that we brought in as well. We also brought in an external data source called NASWA Integrity Data Hub, which is basically a crowdsource data source for state workforce agencies that constantly provide data to this program that feeds them fraud information from states all across the United States. So we can leverage that and bounce our unemployment claim data off of that data to see fraudulent activity. So a fruitful data set that just enhances the ability to detect fraud. There's a lot of other state agency data that was brought in. I mentioned incarcerated individuals, death records, things like that to help enhance the fraud solution. And then agencies also had a watch list, just known suspicious bank accounts or suspicious emails that are just known that they get. There's just data sets brought in to help improve the solution. So all of that gets brought onto a centralized data analytics platform, basically all replicated daily so that it's available through data engineering pipelines. All of that data is then onboarded, and then from there it gets all brought together. All of the data consolidation, data modeling, denormalization, aggregations, just fraud scenarios, all of that gets done in a centralized kind of project zone or fraud zone, where really all of the fraud solutioning gets done. It brings the data from all of those different data sources and actually builds out the fraud solution. And as I mentioned before, it's a very it's a framework that is scalable and flexible, so it can easily bring in new data sources, new scenarios, which we do pretty much every week to continue to enhance the solution. But that's really what the centralized data platform is all about, is to bring all the data together so that all the fraud analysis can be done and sourced in a centralized environment, and all of the processes can be run from that. Another thing to note is, so there's traditional and pandemic unemployment. Again, two completely different types of unemployment from two completely different types of systems that are all kind of normalized and brought into one single fraud solution. So it's all going through one solution, even it's two different unemployments, two different types of unemployments, two different systems. It all feeds through the exact same solution, and it's all normalized that way. The predictive modeling happens within there as well too. And then again, lastly, as we go to the right, you see the all the Tableau prep and presentation of the information for end users. So that's really the end users. There's also power users that are strong data people that have direct access to the unemployment analytics zone, where they can go in and do their own self-service detailed ad hoc analysis as needed. But again, this centralized approach really makes it much more efficient for just building out the solution and continuously improving the solution that's fully operational. All right, and then lastly, as a component is the predictive model, fully operational machine learning predictive model that was implemented as part of this solution. So that was built, it obviously conducts advanced statistical analysis to identify the actual strength of correlation to fraud for all of the 60+ fraud variables based on data patterns from actual fraud determination. So it's looking at the actual data patterns from how fraud is being determined and seeing how those 60+ variables, how strong are they based on how the fraud is actually being determined. And then there's a predictive model built leveraging those patterns to build an optimal model to predict fraud based on all that information. So rather than just looking at the business rules, the hard-coded business rules from the 60+ scenarios, it's really taking into account how data is actually being determined and how fraud's being determined to identify likelihood of fraud. It's fully operational, and again, it's trained against actual fraud determination data to more accurately identify and predict fraud. There's also a Tableau dashboard built to monitor the predictive model performance and accuracy for transparency. So as you'll see a lot of times in data science and predictive model are included in these types of solutions, a lot of times it's done within a black box, and it's just you get this final score and that's all you get, and there's not a lot of information behind it. But we built a Tableau dashboard, a very comprehensive one that monitors the model. It provides how accurate it is. It gives percentages on how well it's actually predicting fraud so that users can see it, they can trust it, and understand how the model's performing before they actually leverage it and use it and flag and investigate fraud accordingly. And then, of course, lastly, the predictive model outputs are integrated right into the main fraud dashboard for users to leverage and act on high probability fraud. You can see there's a little snippet below of what that looks like within the fully comprehensive dashboard. Obviously, this is just a little snippet of the dashboard, but there's a lot more comprehensive robustness to the dashboard for it to be used. But this is one really valuable piece of the dashboard where they can go in. It has all of the claimants that get scored, get fed through the predictive model every night and scored accordingly based on the predictive model outputs. And they get bucketed into different bins based on their scores. And it also provides a predictive disposition of, are they predicted as allowed or disallowed? Allowed meaning not fraud, disallowed meaning fraudulent. So they have the ability to leverage this and really prioritize their list for investigation, so they can always focus on the highest probability of predicted fraud and then work their way backwards to do their investigations that way. So in their dashboard, they have the predictive score results that they can use. There's also a calculated score, which is just the hard-coded calculation based on these 60+ scenarios. There's just a hard-coded calculation that gets applied there if they want to leverage that as well. But the predicted score is really the one used the most just because of its accuracy in predicting fraud. All right. So how to initiate your own fraud analytics story. Kind of touched on a little of these throughout the way, but I'll kind of go through each of them and just elaborate on them a little bit. First one is ideate with agency program leadership on the challenges and opportunities that can save money. And again, if it's really working with the business or the agency or the program leaders, not IT, to really understand what their challenges are, what their opportunities are that could save them money or detect fraud. That's really the most important thing, is making sure that they're involved, and it's not just discussions with IT, but the agency and the business is involved to help drive those things. going along with that, think big, don't hold back because you think the challenge is insurmountable. A lot of times things just get cut from the list because they think it's just too big of an effort or it's just not doable. But with technology today, things within Tableau and other technologies, a lot of it is very doable and in an efficient way. So it's important when you're having these discussions to not hold back, think big, and then go from there, because that's where you really identify some big opportunities and big value. We talked about this a little bit before, but start small, identify low-hanging fruit. Not every use case will be a home run, but this agile approach mitigates risk of bad major investments and allows for flexibility. When you start small, identify low-hanging fruit and identify value and kind of go where the value is from there, is a very effective approach. Identify and locate the data required to support the use case. So once you have those scenarios and requirements and business questions identified, locate the data, begin exploring the data, prototyping, collaborating with SMEs. Tools like Tableau are really, really great for bringing in the business to do collaboration, do working sessions with them, get their feedback immediately. Don't hold back on building a prototype just to see if there's value there. If there's not, you don't spend a lot of money or time on it, and you move on to the next idea. But it's definitely important to just not hold back, get started quickly, and go from there, and then land and expand. So once there's value and there's an initial release, continue to improve it, repeat the process over and over again, and continue to identify value. And that's just kind of a more common modern analytics approach, not just with Tableau, but all analytics use cases. All right, so that wraps up the presentation of the unemployment fraud analytics solution. I think we can now open it up to questions.
Yeah, Jason, that was awesome. Thank you so much for the overview. Love really kind of how you peeled the onion back on it, got into the solution, and got into some of those core lessons learned. We got a couple of questions here, Jason, if you don't mind, if you got a couple more minutes to hang out. I know as you were walking through just the overview of the entire solution, some of the nuances of it, you know, obviously we're looking at this being implemented again at one particular client, but from your perspective, how repeatable is the process to develop a framework around fraud analytics? Is this something that, and I don't want to say turnkey, but in the context of the methodology and just kind of the overall capability ramp up and development of those capabilities, do you see this as a repeatable process?
Yeah, I do. And that was a big focus of ours as well. And it was built with a repeatable framework in mind. Obviously, as you mentioned, the nuances and unique fraud scenarios may change for each implementation or each use case. But the framework and approach stays the same, with just minor code tweaks to meet those precise needs or changes. But the framework is definitely there. It's really just tweaking it based on the specific needs or the use case or the industry. So yeah, definitely a repeatable solution that it's not turnkey, as you said, but definitely the framework's there to quickly turn it around and meet the needs of a different use case, fraud use case, or even across industry as well.
Yeah, no, it sounds like those capabilities really, when we talk about agnostic of industry, you know, any basically industry that is going through some sort of benefits or, you know, payment transactional process where they're looking to understand, are there items that are maybe discrepancies, outliers that could constitute fraud? It seems like the capabilities that you all have put in place could be aligned to other elements, right, above and beyond just this one particular domain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it even showed, I think I mentioned it before, but I mean, we started with pandemic unemployment claims, which is its own type of unemployment, system, and then brought in traditional unemployment claims, which completely different system, completely different type of unemployment. We're able to bring that through the same fraud model. So it transcends across different systems, different types of fraud. And you're right. I mean, it's all similar when you think of benefits or payment fraud. I mean, there's a lot of relationships and overlap of that where there's definitely a lot of repeatability there with this framework.
Yeah. Jason, you mentioned in the context of an iterative approach to this, right? And we look at iterative from a development perspective as building technical capabilities, maybe doing it in more formal sprints. But walk me through, I guess, from your perspective, the people side of that iterative approach and what constitutes a good kind of pragmatic rollout of said capabilities from that iterative perspective. You know what I mean? Like you're developing things from a sprint cycle perspective, but the human element, the people element, your end users. Walk me through how you architected that rollout of the solution.
Yeah, I think I mentioned this before, but we obviously had weekly sprints. There was constant new ideas, new enhancements, where we would meet with them every week to talk about sprint planning, and just get information, gather requirements, get additional information. How's the solution working? Is there anything that could be improved? We get that information and we would work through those enhancements or changes every week. Once we got those implemented, we would present that. We basically did a show and tell every week with the entire audience of end users, to show them, first of all, what the changes look like, so that they were aware, trained up on how they could use it. We also got feedback from them on any questions or concerns that they have. And again, just made sure that they were engaged every week through the entire process so that we can make sure that the solution was as effective as possible for them, but also that they were aware, they felt like their input was being seen, and the solution was just as optimal as possible for them. So that was a continued focus. It's a continued focus for us every week, is to make sure that they are engaged. And after that show and tell, they have their own little time after that to do some additional user acceptance testing, just make sure everything looks good. And once it is, that gets released to production. And again, we continuously gather feedback from them, meet with them weekly, present show and tells. So again, the key, I mean, it's just, I wouldn't say there's a silver bullet, but just making sure that they are engaged throughout the entire project to make sure that there was trust, understanding of the information so that they could quickly act and address the fraud issue. I mean, there's nothing users hate worse than getting something thrown over the fence to them without them having any input or kind of feedback involved. So that was one of the most important pieces of the entire process, is keeping them engaged.
Yeah, and I gotta imagine that was probably a critical success factor in the context of an adoption strategy, right? As you're rolling these things out, making sure that you're integrating the people side of it and making sure that the capabilities are actually being utilized, easily understood, intuitive to use. Walk us through some of that experience.
Yeah. I mean, we kind of worked with them a lot and just made sure that they were included, did kind of working sessions with them. We tried to provide for things like the predictive model. I mean, obviously that can be a very confusing thing. I mean, it's a very complex thing, but what we wanted to make sure to do is we brought them along and made it as transparent as possible. And the tools we were leveraging made that easy to do as well, but as transparent as possible. We built Tableau dashboards that allowed them to see how the model was performing and just help with increase their trust in the model. So things like that were really important, just to make sure that everything was transparent along the way, in addition to just making sure that their voices were heard and their input was being heard on a weekly basis at least. And even then, we were made available if they had any ad hoc questions and things like that. But it was just constant engagement with them throughout the entire time. So there is a part of it of making sure that there are dedicated subject matter experts that are going to help out with that part of it. I mean, it's not just a one-way street. Obviously, it's important to have the stakeholders agree to be involved as well, which we were very fortunate that they were involved as well to be as engaged when we asked them to be engaged. So that was part of the success as well.
Yep. Jason, this was great. I can't thank you enough for giving us an overview here. Love not only the technical capabilities that were put in place, but the methodology behind the thoughts here, the rigor in the development cycle. And I think the other critical success factor in this entire journey is bringing the end users along, both from a adoption perspective, making sure that they were in tune with the capabilities, the intent of the capabilities, and really driving strong utilization. And I think, you mentioned a dollar figure that has been a return on investment of this solution. I mean, it's been great. Fantastic job. Looking forward to all the other development efforts that you're working on, and looking forward to next year's Tableau conference for you to get on the docket again. Thanks so much for your time, Jason.
Thank you.